Hey everyone, thanks for checking into the Pit Stop. It's Will.
And James from Amazing Race Season 33. Oh, not from Amazing Race 33. Amazing Race 32, but we are recapping Amazing Race 33 episodes 1 through 3. Yay, I'm so happy that we're finally talking about this season. As you know, we've been on our honeymoon the past 2 weeks, and we were in Ecuador, and the premiere episode, Will was there. He knows how much of a process it was just to load the episode, to get it to work. I was so eager to watch the premiere that I'm glad that we were able to watch it while we were gone, even though we just caught up on episode 3 today.
We looked for 4 hours to try and find a link to the 2-hour premiere while we were in Ecuador. We didn't find one that was able to watch, so we had to watch it the following day after already knowing what happened because of spoilers on the internet. But we finally got to watch it the next day, and then we just watched episode 3 today, so we're all caught up, thank God.
Yes, but priorities on our honeymoon. We had to watch it. But I kind of think it works out this way. I mean, Will, when we were watching the episodes today, you said it was like a good prequel, to what the actual race is about to be. Because as we know, production had to shut down after the 3rd episode, and then they come back 19 months later. So in a way, it was a prequel to the actual race. So it's okay for us to kind of group them all together, these first 3 episodes.
Yeah, this season's different. I mean, there's never been teams where they've been able to race a little bit and then go home, know what the race is about, and then be able to come back stronger and better if they choose that. They might come back and they're just like quarantine 15. But I think at the beginning, when we did our cast assessment, where we talked about all the teams, we just have their bios, we have those short little video clips. That's how we assess who they are as a team, to say, this is who I think is gonna do really well. But now, since the race is technically restarting in episode 4, that's kind of, to me, when the actual race is starting. We have these 3 episodes of seeing the dynamics, seeing how teams work together. There's obviously some that are a little stronger than others, but now going into this actual Amazing Race 33, it feels like we understand the teams better and can make better assumptions about how we think they're all going to do.
It was like a test drive.
Yes, for the viewers and for them. I mean, I can't imagine, for us, 3 episodes would have been Trinidad and Tobago, Bogota and Manaus, and we were 4, 6, and 1. We would have kind of been okay.
I don't know what I would have done. Oh my gosh, that would have been a mind screw. I would have been so upset, because I feel like at that point, after 3 legs, we were finally starting to find our stride in the race and finding our momentum. So that would have been a huge bummer. But before we talk about the shutdown and what to expect with this next portion of season 33, let's talk about the premiere episode, episode 1, We're Back. The way the episode started, it wasn't a traditional starting line that we see almost every season, with the exception of season 28, because that was the social media season. Everyone was starting from their homes. So we got to kind of see them, a little glimpse of them at their homes in their hometown. What did you think of that? Do you prefer the traditional starting line, or is this something that might be what we see more often moving forward?
Honestly, I like when all the teams are together. I think it creates some energy and excitement for the racers, but also the viewers, because it feels tense. It feels way more tense than just kind of being at your own home. I remember walking up to our starting line and having nervous poops and anxiety and being so stressed out. If you and I were at home with our dog and we were okay, we're racing, I feel like it would have been not as stressful, maybe a little paranoid, but it definitely wouldn't have had the same energy as a live pit start or race start.
Well, even then, we're sequestered for a good 5 days. I mean, for us, this was our experience. We were sequestered for 5 days before we even got to the Hollywood Bowl to hear Phil say, "Go, the world's waiting for you." So we were in a hotel and we could see all the other teams and kind of make assessments and size each other up and kind of get an idea of what the relationships were before we even like started the race. So this was a completely different start. So they didn't really get to meet each other, only some of the teams, until they got to like that home airport where we saw some of the teams interacting with each other. But I kind of had almost a Big Brother type feel to me, where you see like the Big Brother house guests at home finding their keys and they're getting excited and they get in a car to go to the studio. It kind of felt the same way. And not that I hate it, like I think this type of starting line worked for the social media season, given the fact that it was very media driven and they had their phones and their devices, and I think it was exciting for that type of theme. But for this, with there not being much of a theme, I'm really curious to know creatively like why they decided to do this starting line as opposed to a traditional everyone's lined up listening to Phil and everyone running out at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and another thing was when we were like running our race, the director for the starting line and finish line even told us that the only time we ask you to do reshoots is when we produce the starting line of the race, and when we do the finish line of the race, like we might make you do two different run throughs. Like for our starting line, we did at least 5 run up the hill. It was awful. And then we did a ton of reshoots of the teams running in by themselves. We did all kinds of angles for when Phil says go. So knowing that like that's a huge aspect of producing the show and directing the whole starting line, I am curious as to why they chose to do it at home. Honestly, COVID could have been involved of like not having teams try. I don't know. It was early on in the pandemic, but it still could have been involved in the process.
So they get a clue on their phone from Phil that tells them that they will be making their way to London, England for their first clue, which can be found in Trafalgar Square. And then he instructed them to grab their bags and make their way to the nearest airport to catch their flight. You know, now I don't know about you, but every time I hear the theme, like the word oatmeal is now ingrained into my head. So thanks, Penn, for that. I hear it. I hear oatmeal.
I always thought it said like, oh yeah.
but now
I'm like, oh, that's so, now I only hear oatmeal.
We do get a little bit of background with like Akbar and Sheridan and Anthony and Spencer and Raquel and Kayla and Ryan and Dusty. And a lot of what they were saying in the episode, I feel like we got a little taste of in their pre-team, pre-race promo videos. So everything that we felt in our cast assessment for me kind of rang true watching just the first 5 minutes of this episode. But I really loved, well, when we were on our way to the taxi, like, do you remember exactly like how you were feeling when we were actually on the way? Because what I loved about Kim, and I know you said this after our cast assessment, is like she's just very authentic. She seems very honest with how she's feeling. And I loved when she said, I feel excited, but I'm also a little bit terrified. I think that's actually a really great way of summing it up and like how you feel in those first initial moments.
Well, I think it's important for any team to be honest about what emotions they're having. Like if she was just like, I'm just really excited, but on the inside, she's incredibly stressed and tense or terrified, and something happens with her and Penn, and then she reacts negatively or has a blow up and takes it out on him. Instead, if he knew that she was already terrified, he can balance it out and be the support that she might need. So I think the reason why I feel that she's so authentic is because she's being incredibly honest with her emotions, which to me is really important as a team to understand what your partner's going through and what they're feeling, especially in stress, which on the flip side, I don't think Ray and Caro are on that page.
No, which we definitely see more so in the last episode 3. So all teams are flying from Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and Charlotte. They meet in London, and they're often running to their taxis to get their next clue in the Trafalgar Square, where they had to find men dressed in red telephone boxes, which is very on brand for London. But not all of the guys dressed in the red telephone boxes had clues. So we saw Raquel and Kayla and Kim and Penn and Ray and Caro kind of all run up at the same time. But because Raquel and and Kim and Penn were the first two teams to get to that specific telephone man, they got the clue. So Ray and Caro had to go find a clue elsewhere, which I kind of liked that it was total chance. It was such a gamble, which I think definitely makes it a little bit more stressful.
Especially at night. I mean, the costumes were ridiculous, and I feel like you could see them from far away. Just men walking around as telephone booths, I feel like I would notice. So I feel that it was smart to make the clue kind of move around, but also have them limited. They've done that in the race before, but to start it off, I thought that was clever.
So they got there pretty quickly, but we saw Sam and Connie have a little bit of an issue with their taxi. I mean, granted, I know they talked about how their taxi completely went a different direction than all the other teams, which when that normally happens on the race, you immediately think, oh shit, like, what am I going to do? Like, you know, why are all the teams going this way? Like, maybe this will actually work out in our favor. But I think, especially in the first leg, that would have been so incredibly stressful to like know you're not with the pack.
You always want to be able to see a team when you're racing, especially when you're in a car. If you can't see a team and somebody turns somewhere, you might be going the wrong way, which is kind of what happened. They just went a longer way that had more traffic. You always want to be able to see at least one team if you can.
And I know going into our season, Will's like biggest fear was taxis, because you're kind of out of control with where to go as far as navigation is concerned. And when we first landed in Trinidad and Tobago, we had the worst luck with taxis. And it didn't show in the edit, but we had to switch to 2 different taxis at the airport because one taxi didn't start. The second guy didn't seem really like he knew where he was going. And so that was so stressful to leave the airport in 11th place and like knowing that information when we had to get to a spot to sign up or get our first clue to like be on the first flight the next day. To start the first leg of the Amazing Race like that, it just sets the tone for the rest of the leg. And I feel like you could kind of see the relief with Connie when they finally checked in at the pit stop later in the episode that, thank God we're not eliminated, you know?
Taxis are make or break in a lot of situations. It just, whoever car you get in can really help you or really hurt you.
So when they get their clue at Trafalgar Squares, telling them that they have to go to Buckingham Palace to find their next clue. So it's a lot of like on foot, running. And when they get to their next clue box, it's the detour. It's either Artist Den or DigiBen. In Artist Den, teams had to properly paste a 36-piece poster to a wall in order to receive their next clue. But in DigiBen, teams had to find a Bobby in Parliament Square near Big Ben, and then a promoter by Little Ben, who would then send them to DJ DigiBen in Piccadilly Circus Tube Station to get their next clue. I think initially when we watched the detour play out, just knowing the information right off the bat, we kind of felt like if we were in that situation, we would have picked the Artist Den. Because to me, DigiBen felt almost like there's multiple locations that you had to go to, and it just felt like a lot of running. Where with the Artist Den, you only go to one spot, you do the task, and then you're on your way. Now thinking back on it and seeing the episode play out, I think DigiBen might have actually been the better detour choice. You still don't feel that way?
No, I still would have been super confident in doing Artist Den. Just because there are situations where like, okay, if the first task that I need to do includes running all over London, okay, what if in 2 more challenges I also have to run? I don't want to be like dead. So if it's an art versus run, I feel like the 2 of us are way more craft minded that it would be easy for us to do a quick little puzzle. Granted, you don't know that's what it is when you choose, but if it was doing something with art, I feel like the 2 of us would be like, yes, that's it. That's the one.
You also hate running. There's no secret.
Oh, I never will choose a running challenge.
But I'm curious to know how many teams had maps of like the area prior to getting there. Because I think if you and I had a map Because I know when we landed in Paris, we grabbed like a tourist map on the way out of the airport, which ended up being the metro map, which wasn't super helpful. But I feel like if you have a map of the area and you can kind of see geographically where these things were in relation to each other, perhaps, maybe it wasn't as much of a distance. But I also think there's a little bit more opportunity to ask locals, like, where is this? But then it also holds you up because then you have to get releases signed for production purposes. And so that's why I still think, yeah, Artist Den, you're probably right. We would have stuck to our guns and just done Artist Den.
Especially when, like we just said, when you can see other teams doing the task that you're doing, not only do you feel a little bit more comfortable and you still have that hustle of like, I need to beat the teams that I'm with. But if you're running around London and you never see another team, kind of similar to Sam and Connie, you have no idea what place you're in. And that's kind of, I think, why she also was relieved when they checked into the pit stop, is because they didn't really know where they were because they probably never saw another team.
Well, it seems like the teams are pretty split. Half went to Artist Den, half went to DigiBen. For Artist Den, it was Ray and Caro, Kim and Penn, Taylor and Isaiah, Arun and Natalia, and Lulu and Lala. With the Artist Den, I really loved immediately how Kim was like, this is the Amazing Race. The Amazing Race isn't just going to have you throw things up on a wall and pretty much call it a day. Like, there's got to be more to it. So because she has race brain, I like to call it, she immediately was like, no, there's more to this. It's going to be a puzzle. So because they were able to figure that out so quickly, it helped them set up the puzzle on the floor prior to pasting onto the actual wall. Where I feel like some teams, for instance, like Michael and Mo, they just started putting up all of their poster pieces on the wall and thinking that that was really the challenge. And that's obviously why they lost a lot of time. But what do you think the strategy was to this detour to be quick? I mean, we know this answer, but like, I just want to know what you think we would have done.
I think setting it out on the floor is obviously the best option. It's clearly a puzzle. If I have a stack of papers and they all have the same pattern, but like a little variability, your brain, hopefully, if you watch The Amazing Race, should go, oh, it's a puzzle. It's a bigger poster that I need to put together. I think laying it out on the floor is probably the best. But I think the second that you have the outer pieces, one person finish the middle, one person start putting pieces on the wall. I think taking too much time to lay it all out, make sure it's confirmed, and then start putting it up would take a lot more time than I think the teams realize. Michael and Mo just started putting it up wherever it goes, wherever they had room. Then they had ripped pieces. That was funny to watch.
Which I think, I mean, they lost a lot of time. And I think because of that mix-up, it just sort of went downhill the rest of the leg for them. With DigiBen, though, I want to talk about this because I feel like our season got a lot of flack for it. But right away in the premiere episode, you hear Anthony say, we're always open to helping or working with another team if we're in the same spot or in the same space, which we saw them do almost immediately with the DigiBen detour because they started working with Ryan and Dusty. I think that's brilliant strategy, especially for this type of challenge. 4 brains are better than 1, especially because there's a lot of moving parts. You have to go to all these different checkpoints. What did you think about that? I mean, I thought it was just really interesting that in the premiere episode, right off the bat, here we have 2 teams working with each other.
It was funny because in the recap for episode 2, like going into episode 2, Phil said the 2 teams formed a strong bond. And so I think there's like a language issue of what you call somebody working together. For us, the whole season was about alliances. Fine, if that's the word we want to use. But in this situation, you have the 2 strong male teams working together because they have a strong bond and kind of helping each other in that situation to do the challenge together, technically, if they're staying together the entire time until the very end. I'm on the page of it is so strategic. It is so strategic. It can either help you or it can hurt you. And in this situation, I can give so much information to the team that I want. If I know where we're going, but I don't tell them where we're going and I try and let them figure it out on their own, there's a lot of strategy and underpinnings around that bond that they have where you can maneuver through it and use it to your advantage, but also make sure that you're always the one that's in a higher position or the one that has more information or the upper hand to help yourself. And it's part of the game. It's if you don't do it, then like why not?
I mean, we've said this time and time again. It's like a broken record. Teams helping teams or working together is not a foreign concept. On The Amazing Race, I'm just glad we saw this happen in the premiere episode right away. Well, so that helps them a lot in DigiBen. They work together. They seem to get through that pretty quickly. They had to find the Bobby Ben and then DigiBen. Now, moving on, once everyone gets their clues, they get route info to move on to the Queen and Boris Johnson. And you said something funny while we were watching this part of the Queen.
Like, do they know that that's not the Queen? Can we just let them know that this is not the Queen? Mainly because if the Queen is sitting, you cannot like approach her. You cannot stand while she's seated. You cannot touch her. You cannot like go in for a kiss like Penn did. If you watch The Crown, there are so many rules to when you meet the Queen that's not how it would happen. So I'm curious at the time if anyone thought that she was actually the Queen, because it felt like some of them were just like, oh, it's the Queen. The guy who looked like Boris Johnson was fantastic because he definitely looked like Boris Johnson.
The Queen looked like the Queen. I feel like they both look so great.
I mean, she's like 90, 95-ish, give or take 2 years. That woman, she was perfect, but she did not look 95. The Queen is also not going to be surrounded by people at a restaurant.
Yeah.
But I did love the fact that they like incorporated part of London. I mean, Boris Johnson and the Queen. Yeah, I thought that was funny.
Then once they got their clue there, they were instructed to go to the next pit stop, or the first pit stop, which happens to be at London's Natural History Museum. It was a beautiful, beautiful pit stop. I loved how when the teams ran in, that big staircase and the skeleton of the whale above them. I loved it. I thought this was a great pit stop. But as teams start checking in, we see Anthony and Spencer getting first place. They win trip for two from Travelocity to Turks and Caicos, Ryan and Dusty in second. And then shortly, literally, it was kind of a foot race to the pit stop between Brian and Dusty and Raquel and Kayla. So those were our first three teams to check in, followed by Kim and Penn, Ray and Caro, Akbar and Sherry, Connie and Sam, Taylor and Isaiah. And then we see back at the Artist Den detour, you have Michael and Mo and Lulu and Lala really struggling with their detour. But by this point, Michael and Mo already know kind of what they were doing wrong and trying to make those corrections to their mistakes. But with Lulu and Lala, they did a pretty great job at getting it pretty quickly. But what I thought was interesting with the judge, and I don't know if you caught this, the judge said there are some spaces between the lines, let's tighten that up. So why is the judge pointing out to the teams, and we saw this in the next episodes, which we will talk about, why are they telling the teams what they're doing wrong?
It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me just because when we did our final challenge with the globe, the judge did tell us that it wasn't straight enough. Like we were told that the issue was this, and in like a small way. Granted, there could be other things that are wrong. It doesn't bother me just because he kept the same. He would have told any team the same information, that what they were doing wrong was that there were holes. Because I think he said it to another team at the beginning of the challenge. It doesn't bother me. If it was like here's the code to this lock that you need. That would have been more of a thing, but it doesn't bother me that they give little like, here's what you're doing wrong.
Yeah, it didn't really matter much because they both seemed to be like on their way to the pit stop at the same time. It was down to Lulu and Lala and Michael and Mo, but Lulu and Lala got to the pit stop first, which meant Michael and Mo were the first team to be eliminated. I was sad to see them go. I mean, again, not knowing the trajectory of the next couple of episodes, I was bummed to see them go. I felt like Michael and Mo had such a great energy just from their pre-cast video that I wish we would have been able to see more of. This is, again, my initial impression when we first watched the premiere, not knowing where we're at currently in the season.
I think this is the perfect kind of wrap up for episode 1 is how would you rate the first leg on a scale of 1 to 10? I'm going to give it a 7, and I'll tell you why. Challenges, great. I thought the London leg of it was great. Downfall for me was that it was at night. Nighttime kind of reduces the scenery that you can see in an episode. 2 was the lack of hustle that I felt from a lot of the teams. It just felt like, especially, I mean, you saw it in Akbar and Sherry, that she goes slow and steady, and he's like, no, that is not how you win this. I feel like that kind of was perpetuated in a couple different teams. So for that reason, just the lack of hustle, especially in a premiere. And I don't know if it was, and also the lack of the all teams together at the start. That would be why I would say it's like a 7. But the challenges were great. London was great. I think it was a great premiere city. But I'm not a huge fan of nighttime stuff, especially in a city like London where it's kind of dead at night. It's not really alive. Like for us, New Orleans in the finale was like New Orleans comes alive at night.
Nightlife is New Orleans. Yeah.
Right. But for London, it's not really that. But loved it. Really excited.
I would also give it a 7. And I'm so glad you brought up the lack of hustle because I totally forgot we talked about this. I remember messaging, I want to say it was our group chat with the season 32 racers, or maybe it was just Leo, probably just Leo, if I'm being honest. I was messaging with Leo about this, and I was like, do you notice that a lot of the teams, at least how I was seeing it, didn't have a lot of hustle? And I think you brought up a good point in the sense that maybe because there wasn't the live starting line, that competitive energy didn't really hit, like right off the bat. Where with our cast, seeing each other, hearing each other talk about each other at the starting line really set the tone, being like, oh my God, we have NFL football players, we have professional beach volleyball players, we have Olympians, we have people who look intelligent, like all these things who were sizing it up. You knew that the competition was going to be fierce right off the bat. And I think that's why you saw a lot of hustle in our premiere episode. But yes, there didn't seem to be a lot of hustle from numerous teams. I would say a lot of the front running teams had a lot of hustle, and that's probably why they performed better and they were in the top half of the pack. But so yeah, I would give the premiere a 7 as well.
And it's also, I like that comment because it says you're in an English speaking country. Getting lost in an English speaking country feels like a big question.
Are you talking about the comment Corinne and Eliza said?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're running around doing the digibend and you need directions, ask. Everyone speaks English. Maybe it sounds a little bit different than American English, but it also, you can ask the question and they will know what you're saying. Yeah. Whereas, I mean, for us, it was Spanish where we were. And then for 31, for Corinne and Eliza, it was Tokyo. So it was Japanese. That's number 1. Number 2 is if you're doing a challenge, make quick decisions. So if I'm going from A to B and after we're running in this direction, then the second that you're like, I don't know where I'm going, find a map, ask somebody, make a quick decision to adjust what you're doing because it's clearly not working. And I don't think that adjustment was as quick as it needed to be. And plus, it'll be the learning leg for a lot of these teams, granted COVID, but whatever.
I'm also thinking, I'm talking about in my brain, having a conversation to myself about the hustle portion of what we just talked about. I feel like for our premiere, all the teams were actually pretty much always together. like you always had a group of teams, at least 5, within the same space as you, so that competitive energy was there. Where in this particular one, since it was on foot, a lot of the teams were spread out, so you didn't
It's
really
just because of
see
the
each other.
detour.
Yeah, so maybe that's why there wasn't a lot of hustle. Where for us, it's like, holy shit, give me the clue. I'm going to rip this open. I need to get going to my next destination. That's probably another factor as to why there might have felt a little lack of hustle.
Or and to if I'm running against professional volleyball players, NFL football players, professional track stars, you know, like there's not a team that's the athletic team besides Akbar and Sheridan, but that was 17 years ago. Like they're not recent retirees from a sport. We were with professional athletes, so I felt like there was just a hustle. But even then, like you have to get those early jitters out of your system in the race. And I think for all the teams, nobody ran a perfect leg. They all had a little bit of struggle. Maybe not the first 3 teams. I thought the first 3 teams did actually a really solid job, but you got to kind of mess up at least once to get those jitters out of your system, to understand how you're going to handle when you mess up. And I think a lot of teams definitely are going to learn from what they're doing wrong.
Well, that's the premiere episode. And going into the second one, it was a double header that night. We have the second episode. It can't be that easy. The race starts off with what I thought, again, was interesting. Raquel and Kayla, as well as Ryan and Dusty, they're out in the streets of London and looking for taxis together. And then they decide, you go this way, we'll go this way, and we'll meet up at the destination together. So once again, there's a little bit of this camaraderie of like teams just naturally helping each other. So while they're looking for taxis together, Anthony and Spencer are having a lot of difficulty finding a taxi, and they're standing outside of a hotel. Like you hear them say that at one point, like we're outside of a hotel, like how hard can this be? But I think, I don't know if I remember correctly, when we were watching this together during our honeymoon, was it more so the fact that they should have kept moving? Like they should have kept moving, or do you think that they should have kept staying in the same spot?
You need to move and also like flag down a taxi, and maybe it means being a little bit more assertive and stepping in front of a car to stop them, or going to where there's a light where cars are stopping. So when taxis are forced to stop at a light, you can go, can I get in your car? Can I get in your car? Can I get in your car? And not so much as when cars are driving by quickly, because the likelihood that they're going to see you standing there is lower. So I think where they were, I would have kept moving, but also tried to find them. I don't think at any point, if you're just standing still, not doing anything, you got to move. You got to keep your body going.
Just to figure out another method, to figure out something else. For this roadblock, it was who still gets mail. It's a 6.5 mile track underneath the city to help deliver the mail, which I thought was so cool and so fascinating. We've been to London before. I did not know this thing even existed. One team member had to ride that train along to one of the loading docks to sort through a bin filled with packages and envelopes in order to find their next clue. So all the participants for this are Ryan, Raquel, Anthony, Penn, Ray, Sherry, Connie, Arun, Taylor, and Lulu. One of the first people there is Ryan. He seems to do it pretty quickly. And then you have Raquel showing up at the same time as Anthony. And Raquel, queen shit right here, finds it within 15 seconds. And now watching it a second time, because they didn't show her finding it, but the camera was actually focused on Anthony rummaging through one of the bins. And you could hear Raquel in the background going, oh, this is it. Literally like that quickly. So they probably didn't even have it on camera just because of how lucky she got. But she was in and out, which I thought was really incredible. Meanwhile, Ray and Penn show up and they're completely overthinking this entire task. And I think it might be one of the easiest tasks we've seen in Amazing Race in a while. But because of that, it's so simple, you can't help but overthink it. I think that's totally normal in a high stress situation. The same thing goes to like us in Bogota. The clue said it. find in order to get your next clue, just hook up the damn horn.
Up the horn. Yeah.
Oh, because we were we were just so wrapped up that we were like, it's literally just the horn that mattered. And at the end of the day, with this situation, all they had to do is find their clue. That's what the clue said, but they overthought it.
It's the power of production. And I think they've been doing this for 20 years. They know that little details that in a normal situation you wouldn't overthink. If somebody said, go get the mail, you'd be like, okay, I'm gonna go get the mail. But in the race, those little details are what throw teams off. And they know that. That's why they make things either super simple or really complicated, because they know it's going to cause a rift or somebody to not do well. And I think that they've just mastered the art of forcing overthinkers to overthink.
And I mean, Anthony finds it and he was a little unsure, but he decided to stick to his gut and was like, I'm gonna say this is the clue. But at that same time, you have Penn and Ray finding the clues, but being like, this is too easy. Like, is this the clue? It can't be that easy. And completely second guessing themselves while Anthony gets on the train, goes away. So this is where I'm confused. Anthony did not come back. So when did it click for Penn and Ray that actually was the clue? Because you have Connie, you have Sherry, you have Arun showing up, and they all get the clue pretty quickly, and then they're waiting for the train back to the other teams. And even then, that's when it realizes, oh, this is the clue. But if Anthony didn't come back, wouldn't that have been like that immediate, oh, this is the clue?
100%. Also, there's some comments right now that are like, if you see something that says The Amazing Race, that's it. That is what you're looking for. If you're looking through a big thing of mail and there's people's addresses on there, and then all of a sudden one envelope says The Amazing Race, and it looks like a clue. Ooh.
Okay. In their defense, though, I'm putting myself in their shoes for a second. The clue, and I think I could relate to Penn and Ray for a minute. I think if I was doing this, I might have had a moment of second guessing, just because I'm such a fan that I would say the clue is a standard bright yellow envelope. In this situation, it looked almost like a manila envelope, which is like the rest of the colored mails and packages that are in these bins. It goes to like when we were in the meat factory or the meat market in Almaty, Kazakhstan. And we were there for 30 minutes because we thought we were looking for a red and yellow flag on one of the vendor bins. Because we were so focused on just like the different details of the race, we lost so much time when it was really just a freaking clue box if we just opened our eyes and looked up. So in this situation, because I feel like the standard clue is bright yellow, I think it was pretty natural and maybe normal to kind of second guess for a minute. And I know that there were some former racers on Twitter who had mentioned that Anthony had opened the clue without Spencer being next to him. And when I was watching it back, I noticed that it was torn open. And I feel like, sure, the rule is you can't open your clue unless you're with your teammate, right? In this situation, I feel like there's a little bit more leniency just because you don't know what the clue is. It just says to find your next clue. So my guess is Anthony probably tore it open just to be sure it was a clue. And when you saw the blue envelope inside, it probably was like, this is the clue. He probably didn't.
Well, there's like two levels of protection. You have your yellow envelope, and then your insert opens as another envelope or a card, I guess. So even if he did open it and pulled out something, that doesn't mean he actually opened it. And it's also like you're giving them a challenge where they have to find the clue and like rummage through something. And you can't punish them if they're like, is this it?
No, because I don't think he read the clue. I just think he zipped it open, saw the blue envelope, and was like, hey, this is the right clue. And he moved forward. I also saw, so we were talking about how like Ryan and Dusty and Anthony and Spencer helping each other on the DigiBen detour the leg prior obviously helped and worked in their favor. In this situation, in this instance, people might argue, oh, this is why working with other teams is not a smart strategy, or maybe working with other teams, or this is an example of why teams shouldn't work together. I think it's knowing when to cut your losses while working with another team. Like in this situation, even though Anthony wasn't directly working with Penn and Ray were clearly second guessing themselves, where Anthony was hearing that conversation, knowing they were second guessing themselves, but Anthony still decided not to let that affect his thoughts, and he still went on and moved forward. So I think in these situations when you work with another team where you're near other teams, it's knowing or having confidence in your own instinct to know
trusting yourself.
Yeah. But because they didn't trust themselves and they got wrapped up in the moment, they didn't move on from finding their envelope quickly. So yeah, Sherry, Arun, and Connie show up. They do it pretty quickly. Once all the teams do this roadblock, they then get route info to go find their next clue, which is in Leicester Square, which is known as the theater city portion of London. Ray and Caro seem to have tensions start to be a little bit high at this point because, Caro wants to know, what happened? What took so long? And Ray was like, oh, I thought it wasn't a clue. Caro's like, for the record, if it says The Amazing Race on it, that's the clue. And I didn't feel like Caro was being, rude about it. I think it was one of those things that's trying to help your teammate, in the future, just be mindful, this might be as simple as it seems. But tensions were starting to get high between Ray and Caro. And because they are a newer relationship and they're finally traveling with each other in a high stress situation, I think this was a pretty normal disagreement between the two of them. I wasn't surprised that happened.
No, especially if one thing in a relationship, and I think you and I work on this too, is giving feedback to your partner and understanding how they need feedback delivered, and also how to respond to receiving feedback from your partner. That's obviously something that they haven't really explored. They don't live together. They've only been dating for 7 months. So watching them learn that, oh, I might need to say it differently, and him being like, oh, I might need to respond differently. That's normal.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised that this little disagreement happened. So for the detour, there was a choice between bullseye, mate, or decorate. In bullseye, mate, both team members had to score a bullseye on a dartboard in the same 6-toss round in order to receive the next clue. In decorate, teams were presented with 12 cakes that resembled the flags. And I got out the list of the flags that were present in the cakes: Sierra Leone, United Kingdom, South Africa, Norway, Germany, Brazil, Jamaica, France, Chile, Thailand, and Colombia. And then had to replicate 2 of the cakes from countries that are part of the European Union, which the answer was France and Germany, in order to receive their next clue from the master baker.
James, would you have known that the UK is not part of the EU?
I kind of feel like I would have been in the same situation as Kayla. Kayla did set the record straight, and when her little interview, she knew Brexit was happening and she knew that this was actually a thing, but never really knew for sure if UK, I think I would have been in the same boat as Kayla, but I know you would have known that I don't think we would have struggled with this. And I think we would have chosen this detour over the bullseye mate. Sorry, can you imagine us drinking a pint of beer and throwing darts? I mean, sure, if we're at a bar,
let's do it.
Local, why not? But when you have an option with cake, y'all know Will loves this frickin' cake. We're gonna do the cake.
Yeah, I love cake so much. Yeah, I would have known that Brexit happened. I would have known that it was France and Germany. Norway would have thrown me for a loop just because it's technically in Europe. But if you have France and Germany, which those are, we studied the flags before, but I feel pretty confident that we would have known it was those 2. But I think that was brilliant producing, again, by the team to utilize current events in trying to throw the teams for a loop, because it honestly probably wasn't much before the race that Brexit actually happened and they left the EU. It had to have been quickly after Britain left. Whatever. It's irrelevant, but I love that they used current events in the challenge, that you kind of had to know more things about the country. And I know that there was a comment, I don't remember what it said, but similarly, they do that on the race where, for instance, for us in Germany, having to know the word sauerkraut is very cultural and specific to Germany, which is similar to knowing that the UK has left the EU. So you have to know those current events in a lot of these locations that you go to, because they can come up in the challenges that you do, or it also can help you.
I like jelly donuts for question. I believe this is Ben. So hi, Ben. Could you go outside and ask someone to Google it? Honestly, it kind of just depends on what the additional info said in your clue. If there was nothing in there that said you couldn't do it, I think that it's fair game. I think you could have absolutely gone out to the street, used someone's phone, come back and done it.
I would have. If I didn't know the answer, I would have gone out. Yeah. Unless it was part of the rules that you couldn't.
That's why I think it could have been in the additional envelope or the additional information. I mean, if any of the racers from this season watch this recap and they get to this part, let us know, because I would be curious to know if it was actually specified.
That you couldn't ask for somebody for help on the street. Like you couldn't leave the whatever.
We had parts on our season where it would specify in the clue, you can't ask locals for help, or you can't get this answer from a local. Like it was like you had to figure it out on your own.
I don't remember. I don't think that was part of sauerkraut.
Well, no, because Haley got to ask someone the answer.
If I hadn't been given the answer, I immediately would have gone to ask somebody to look on their phone. Yeah. Like that.
I mean, that's how easy it would have been. Regardless if a team helped us, you would have still asked a local.
That was my plan when I got up there. I was like, if they don't know what it is, I'm going to ask somebody. So I just memorized the letters when I went down. Yeah, I don't know how to spell sauerkraut still. Sauerkraut, I think. But besides the point.
Sauerkraut, that word will forever haunt all of our cast. So yeah, decorate, I think, would have been the detour to do here. Everyone seemed to get it either on their first or second attempt, where on the bullseye mate side, you know, Ryan and Dusty seemed to kind of breeze through. I feel like this was a detour for them. They seemed very comfortable with this, where like Arun and Natalia, Arun was so cute with like coaching Natalia how to do it. And like Natalia had so many great throws and would get so close to the bullseye, where it just really, I think it's a matter of patience, right? And even Sam, you know, bringing out that side of him, that's the coach, being really patient with Connie and talking her through it. I just thought those were really cute moments where you see a lot of the relationship dynamic between these teams.
I loved that the coach had to coach his wife. My dad's a coach, so I like pictured that's how he would kind of talk to my mom about doing that challenge. So I loved their dynamic. And I mean, the father-daughter, we haven't seen a father-daughter in so long that I loved how encouraging they were for each other, especially with the darts. I thought that was great.
So yeah, the bullseye mate seemed pretty straightforward, but I kind of want to touch on something else with the decorate. It goes back to the judge, right? Like the judge, I feel like, told everyone what they did wrong. Like in this case, I want to share a tweet that Leo actually tweeted, and I immediately felt the same way. He said, just like the cake judge, he's giving out an incredible amount of info that, if withheld, could have fueled racers in making new and creative mistakes. I feel the same way. I mean, the judge flat out told, I don't remember which team, he told Raquel and Kayla after their first attempt that Britain wasn't in the EU. Where I feel like if he didn't say that, it would have caused the second guessing of like, oh my gosh, is it the UK cake? Or I think Germany was, France was the other one they had. Then it would be like, which one is wrong?
Yeah.
So I feel like he shouldn't have been so eager to give that information over to the team.
I would have done it from like a challenge perspective in two parts. I would say there are two things you need. You need to get the countries right, and you need to get the cakes certified. But I wouldn't have told them which one is wrong. Like if somebody brought two cakes and they put France in the UK, I would have been like, no. And that's all that I would have said for part one. So they would have had to gone back and figured out their mistake for part one. instead of being like, the UK is not part of the EU, that forces them to go back and look at their options and be like, let's try a different one for this cake. I think in this situation, it was too much help. But I also think the challenge should have been divided into two pieces. Like you could have had two judges. This one's the history judge, and then this one's the decorating judge, to where you have to go from phase 1 to phase 2. I think that would have eliminated the amount of help that the judge was giving.
Well, at one point he said this cake has a lot of drippage.
What a terrible word.
Terrible word. But also, like, what does that mean, Master Baker? What is drippage?
I mean, the icing was coming down the side of the cake. Obviously,
what if I creatively wanted it to look like that?
Totally.
What if I wanted a drippage cake?
Well, then the same argument can be made for Michael and Mo making an abstract piece of art. What if I wanted it to look like that?
That's true. But I think that's different in some way. It's a little bit different. Anyway, so those were the ones for the detour. Let us know which detour you would have done. Would you have done bullseye mate, or would you have done decorate? I liked both sides of these detours. I think that they were pretty even as far as like the time portion of it. I think it probably would have taken the same amount of time, but maybe I'm wrong. So Lulu and Lala start to crumble a little bit at this detour of decorate. They're bringing up stuff that doesn't really have to do with the race. Sounds like Lulu
you need to go with that boy and blah blah blah.
Lulu's like literally letting her ex-boyfriend, who's not even on the race, like I feel like this would have been the best break away in a breakup situation. Like, get the hell away from your ex, go do the Amazing Race with my twin sister, and just forget about the bullshit at home. But Lulu was having a moment where real life back home was affecting her performance, affecting her mindset, and Lala was just trying to be supportive, but also that tough love that I feel like a sibling or a relative would want to give their teammate. Race. And because of that, they were definitely butting heads.
It was great. Great TV.
We love a little bicker moment.
But I think, again, this goes back to being completely honest and fully yourself with your teammate. Knowing what's going on in her head, her sister can be like, okay, great, let's talk about it. Let's address this issue. Let's move on. Whereas like a Ray and Caro situation, they're not talking about how they're feeling. They're not talking about what's going on to kind of help each other. That honesty, even if it is about something totally opposite of the race that's affecting you, if I knew that about your brain and your mindset, I could kind of meet you where you are and be supportive, or not be supportive in this case, of like, get over it and move on. Like, you could pull a hung and be like, you have 30 seconds or 5 seconds to whine, and then you got to move on.
Pull a hung. I love that.
That's great advice. For future racers, do the hung and
do the hung.
5 seconds. What'd you say? 5 or 30? 15? 10?
I don't remember the amount of seconds, but I like that. Pull a hung. Like, be hung in those moments. It just have your moment and then move on.
Oh, this is such a good point, that siblings, you can't not be siblings. Married couples, you can get a divorce. Dating couples, you could separate. Best friends, you could not be best friends anymore. But for siblings, just lay it all out there, because you're going to have to get over it. You're going to have to.
I real quick, I want to give a shout out to Nerdtainment. Like, we love them. They have such a great recap show. And so if you haven't watched their stuff, go do it. We love them. And Sarah's our neighbor. We stan. Yeah, Sarah's our neighbor, so it's always fun to see her when we're out walking our dogs. So they have to make their way to the pit stop, which is Russell Square Metro Station. It's a double-decker bus where they're going to find Phil on the second floor of the double-decker, just casually sipping on some tea. You have Ryan and Dusty getting first place. Connie and Sam, I think, had such a great leg. Connie's a queen. We knew this before. in our cast assessment, we were like, we love Connie. I just love her. There's something so wholesome and I just love Connie. Connie and Sam, we have Arun and Natalia also at the top of the pack, better than their last leg prior. Raquel and Kayla, Kim and Penn, Caro and Ray, Anthony and Spencer, Akbar and Sherry, Taylor and Isaiah. And then last was Lulu and Lala. But surprisingly to them, and luckily for them, this happened to be a keep on racing leg, which meant Lulu and Lala were still in the race and they had to go catch a train to Glasgow, Scotland. So that wraps up episode 2. Callie would love to know, how would you rate leg 2 on a scale of 1 to
10? In terms of a leg, I would give it a 9. I think the episode included everything you want in an episode of The Amazing Race. You want teams to overthink. You want teams to have a little bit of conflict within their dynamic. You want challenges that can be really easy, some that take skill, some that take brain power, whatever. And I think this one delivered in a lot of ways. You got to see the teams in a more personal, which happens as episodes go on in any season. You get to know the teams even more, but those conflicts within teams and the overthinking by Penn and Ray, I think, were highlights. It was way better than the first episode. The premiere ended with a very strong hour of television.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think I would give it a 9 as well.
You can't always agree with me.
No, but like, I let you answer first. I would also give it a 9. I think you just, hit on the nose. I think everything you said is exactly why I loved this leg. I think it was a lot better than the premiere. I think this actually would have been a more fun premiere leg, personally. Maybe I'll give it an 8 then, so we don't have the same number, just because this would have been a better premiere.
I'm not going to give it a 10 because of how much the judge did help the teams with the cake. That's the only reason why I wouldn't give it a 10. I think that was one oversight in kind of that challenge. And granted, you can't really predict, or if a judge gives somebody information, you have to allow them to do it for every team. So maybe he messed up on the first time a team came in. But that was the one thing that I thought was, that was the one thing that I didn't like. But everything else, even if the challenges are easy, the fact that easy challenges causes teams to have conflict and causes teams to struggle is way better television and makes the race more interesting and can change the order of team dynamics or team rankings. Like Penn being their second, but leaving, I don't remember what he left him, but like way behind. Like that, even though the challenge was so easy, it caused the race to shift, which I appreciated.
So that wraps up episode 2. And I would say going into this third, and I would say final episode, the reason why I say final is because this is the final episode that they were able to film prior to the shutdown due to the pandemic. And this is going to round up the prequel to the actual race, I feel like, in some ways, as we mentioned at the start of this recap. But before we move on to recapping the third episode, I want to give some shout outs to people in the chat. You have Bruno Silva, you have Jelly Donuts 4, which is Ben, Marsha, we love you. You're always involved, so thanks for being here. Callie, you have Dugong for the win. And I also want to give a shout out to Logan from RTV Warriors. I'm sure you're watching as well, so I want to give you a shout out because we always appreciate your support. So going on into, wasn't there an unaired task? There was an unaired task.
I think it was episode 3.
2 and 3.
Oh.
There's an unaired task for both. For 2, they had to go up some tower and get their next clue. It didn't make the edit. But
the only time that we did that was when? Episode 2?
Paraguay.
Episode 4. Episode 3.
Yeah.
Episode 4.
When we went to the Asuncion sign.
Yeah, but that wasn't really a task. There wasn't any other ones that they cut.
No. A part of the violin task in Paraguay as well. You had to make 2 instruments, but they only showed 1. No comment. No comment. Moving forward with that, teams are now on a train to Glasgow, Scotland. It's a sleeper train, which I love. I wish we actually had a train experience. We never really did, except from Paris to Berlin, but it wasn't like an overnight. Like I wish we had
only like
long...
4 or 6 hours. It wasn't super
Yeah,
long.
it was like during the day. It was Thanksgiving Day. It was a pretty chill morning to night train ride, but it was still fun. It was a great way to connect with other teams. So I did enjoy our train experience. I feel like we've never done a sleeper train, so it just would have been cool to have that experience. So teams made their way to Glasgow, Scotland. It was an equalizer. Again, all the teams were starting off together at the start of this leg because it was a keep on racing. Their crew instructed them to find the next clue on a windshield, and then that would then ultimately bring them to dun dun dun, the bagpipe roadblock. But this was actually their first like self-drive, and we know how this goes. We know how stressful the self-drive can be. But what I thought was interesting is a lot of teams struggled with the self-drive. I mean, ours didn't really show a lot of the teams struggling, except like maybe Haley and Kaylin. And
ours was just way more entertaining.
Ours had more team drama than it was just, oh, I can't drive stick. So a lot of teams were struggling. And, you know, in the team's defense, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, I know there's a lot of critics out there who will be so harsh and say you should learn how to drive stick shift before you go on The Amazing Race.
Bishware.
We know you should, but yeah, like we're saying, where do you learn? We don't have friends who have stick shift. So for us, we have to go outside of the box and actually take classes to learn how to drive stick shift. We found a class
on a 50s, 60s
car. Vintage European stick shift car. I'm like, this will actually be the best way to learn. It backfired because when we got to Europe, when we got to Paris and did the self-drive, we're driving now on a 2019, like brand new, what was it, BMW?
Volkswagen SUV with the freaking, I don't know if it was reverse or park was where gear 1 is supposed to be.
So not the car we learned on. So even if you learn how to drive stick shift for The Amazing Race, it will give you some confidence, but it doesn't mean it's a done deal that you're going to have a smooth sailing experience with your stick shift. That's the point I'm trying to make here.
On top of, stick is hard for people who haven't done it. It takes practice. On top of driving on the wrong side of the road in the opposite seat where you now use your left hand and your feet are, I don't know if they're backwards or not, probably not, but you have to like relearn it again if you've learned in the United States. So this to me would have been a huge challenge. And it's the same thing that Sam said in the car. He said something about park or reverse, mainly because that park reverse is in where gear 1 should be. So you don't want to go all the way to 1 and then all of a sudden you're going backwards. So that's, right. I totally get it. I full support. I know it's hard. I can't imagine doing it in the wrong seat.
Here's the thing. I think if you get eliminated for not knowing how to drive stick shift, that's on you. But if you still survive the leg and you still make it through with stick shift, power to ya. You figured it out. And it's
really very rare. It's very rare that teams actually get eliminated for not being able to drive stick. Give yourself an hour in the car or 30 minutes tops, 30 minutes to an hour tops in the car. You can figure it out. Like, it's not something that isn't impossible, but it definitely is not something that I think normally eliminates teams from the race if they can't drive stick.
Right.
Minus, like, I don't remember that team that really couldn't drive stick a while ago, but I don't know if they were eliminated because of that or they just, I don't know. But it's very rare that that's the reason why you go home.
Well, I think the one team that stuck out with the most struggle or the most like inner team drama would be Ray and Caro. Again, because their relationship is so fresh, I think it makes sense why this little confrontation happened. You know, Caro, who she says she doesn't have her license, is stressed in the backseat. She doesn't feel safe. And I mean, you're in a foreign country and you're driving stick, and if you're not necessarily comfortable driving stick, I understand Caro's mentality of like, I don't feel safe. I don't think that has anything to do or direct reflection on Ray. That's the situation. She didn't feel safe. Or Ray is now getting frustrated because I feel like he didn't feel he had a positive support system from Caro. Or if you're in a relationship long enough with your partner, you're going to know how to support each other. And I'm going to use us as an example. When Will was stressed out in the parking garage in Paris, I knew I could not get to his level. I knew I could not be stressed out. If I did, we wouldn't have succeeded. I knew I needed to be his biggest cheerleader. I needed to support him and talk him through it so he could collect his thoughts and figure out what he was doing wrong. He figured out he was starting in the wrong gear. And this situation, because both partners were stressed out, of course it's going to cause confrontation. I can't fault them for that. I think this was a natural reaction for both of them. And again, relationships are a learning experience and they're just going to need to learn. I mean, now we know they're no longer together, but in this situation, knowing your partner prior to the race is so beneficial. You will know how to support each other in these moments.
You need to at least have one stressful experience together before you do the race, or you're just going to crash and burn. I can't imagine being on this like paradise. Like she even says it, I think, in the premiere or episode 2. They met in like fantasy world. The dates were extravagant and you're just falling in love with no repercussions. Everybody's taking care of you. Then you go into the real world and you actually have to figure out how to like, you know, live together or exist and coexist. And if you haven't had those stressful situations where you see your partner struggle, the first time for you to witness stress and struggle on a national television program feels like not the place.
Yeah.
I mean, I love watching it, but for your sanity and your sake, that just seems like not the place.
To go back to Kathy's point, Kathy says, Caro doesn't even have a driver's license. I think I would at least do that before I agree to go on the race. You have to figure your partner will not always be the one driving. You know, someone did bring this point up to her on Twitter, and Caro did say she didn't have a lot of time to get her license prior to leaving for the race. From the moment she got the phone call, she was passed to the point that they left. There wasn't a quick enough turnaround to actually get her license, especially when she's living overseas at the time and not in the United States.
She's also not an American citizen.
So in Caro's defense, it totally makes sense why she was not able to learn. I still really adore Caro and Ray. And I loved them on Love Island. The race just clearly made it show that they weren't compatible, and that's okay.
Well, and another thing is, I think she's perfect. I love her. I went back and I saw that I sent her a message the second she got her phone after Love Island, just being like, you're amazing. So I love her. The other thing is that when you do the race, you have to get an international driver's license with AAA. And if you don't have your American or an actual driver's license, no matter where, you can't get that international driver's license. I don't know how many conversations she might have had with production about this, but I'm sure that they definitely did. Because it is a requirement that you have your international driver's license, I think, to go on the race. Like, it's the mute point. She's not an American citizen. They probably had 5 weeks. What is she going to do? She doesn't have a car. She can't learn to drive. There's too many obstacles to try and figure it out. You have a partner who can drive. Move on.
Mark Peters says, at least it wasn't like Kurt and Bergen in season 26. Caro and Ray actually stayed in the car. So true. Shout out to Bergen. He's a dear friend of ours and got totally screwed on his experience with the Amazing Race. So unfortunate. So the teams are on their way to get their next clue, which happens to be their roadblock at Orin Mar. Kim and Penn are there pretty quickly. And the roadblock says, who thinks they have this one in the bag? So for this roadblock, one team member had to assemble a set of bagpipes and then play it alongside the Johnson Pipe Band for the length of a Scottish anthem to receive their next clue from the pipe major. The participants in this roadblock were Kim, Dusty, Spencer, Lala, Natalia, Sam, Raquel, Caro, Isaiah, and Akbar. Kim does this pretty quickly, and I felt when she said she wanted to cry, I cried after completing my first roadblock, but I felt that from her, just like that sigh of relief, because I feel like when you do your first roadblock, it's so stressful. There's a lot of pressure on you to perform. You don't want to let your partner down. So I was so excited, and I totally felt her in that moment when she said, "Oh, I just want to cry." So Kim, amazing job on this roadblock. You clearly crushed it.
Again, authentic. I love it.
Yes, speaking her truth, sharing her raw emotions with us. So then you have Anthony, no, sorry, you have Spencer and you have Dusty. They're at the detour at the same time as well. And right when they start laying out all their pieces, Dusty actually gives a tip or says something to Anthony about the bagpipe setup. So once again, naturally in these moments, teams are helping each other. It brought me back to Paraguay when I'm asking questions and teams are helping each other with the violin. It's just going to happen organically that way.
It also, if you know you're in the lead, it's way easier to share information. If I was in the top 4, I think I would allow myself to ask questions and kind of give help. But if you're in the back, like bottom 6, it's way too risky. But also the teams have the full agency to not give help. You could give somebody wrong information. You could just be like, I don't know. But you actually do know. You could not give help. And there's a comment right now about, was this before production made the no helping rule? The rule that they're proposing, and I think that they introduced, does not prevent teams from helping each other during a roadblock. It prevents you from helping a team after you received your clue. So the Natalia situation where she received her clue and is standing there giving teams help, that's when it would be wrong. So it's the same situation for our season of Berlin when Hung got her clue and then gave the answer. Same thing with the other teams. Whatever. That's the only situation that I think the rule prevents from giving help. It doesn't prevent you from doing a challenge with another team, helping each other while you're actually doing the task, which I think you can't manage that. That's so hard to like judge. I could look at what you're doing with the bagpipe and literally copy you the entire time. Granted,
but you're not helping me. I'm just watching you do it.
Right. I don't need to do that, but you can still help each other in roadblocks. You can't help your partner who's doing the roadblock. That's always been a rule. Like James couldn't help me when I was doing any roadblock, vice versa.
It's not like I could be like, what are the letters? Oh, well, it's sauerkraut. Like that would have been wrong.
I think and the rule I agree with, I think it's a really good rule, is that after you get your clue, I can't go back and help a team get their clue. I've got my clue. I now have to move on. I can't stay. I think it's a good rule.
I think it's a good rule too. I know people are so quick to say there's a rule against alliances. There's literally a Wikipedia page if you Google Alliances Amazing Race with every alliance from season 1 up to season 32 that have happened on the Amazing Race. That's going to happen. You can't stop people from forming bonds in these types of situations. That's naturally going to happen. But like, yeah, Will, from what I've read in interviews, what Will's saying is right. The rule that we'll see if it's implemented, we'll see if it changes or if it becomes a thing in this.
I don't think they'll even address it though. I don't think they're going to say anything. I think it's just going to be like,
get your clue, you should be out the door. But since you mentioned Natalia, let's talk about Natalia in this situation. She did a great job. She finished her bagpipes and gets her clue. But on the way out, Sam's like, hey, Natalia, great job. Can you just tell me, like, what am I doing wrong? And the same thing goes with Raquel. Raquel's there. She's gaining this information that Natalia is sharing. And I love Natalia. You know, she's so sweet. She's so genuine. And so, like, for her to help them did not surprise me. I think that's just her nature. But she helps 2 teams, and then literally moments later in the episode, you see her, Rune, getting directions in like a convenience store while Sam and Connie and Raquel and Taylor are out the door with their next clue, getting in their car and on the way. So the 2 teams she helped, she ended up getting passed by, which in this situation, you shouldn't have helped, obviously, those teams. But again, I think it's just a natural reaction sometimes with people you're bonding with. You want to help and see people succeed.
Or just part of humanity. Like you don't want to, you just want to help others. Like that's part of like being a human. You don't want others to struggle. And I think it's still early on in the race that you haven't had consequences yet of helping somebody or somebody being eliminated because of helping. It's happened in the past. I mean, this is the first episode where there's consequences for them helping other teams. And you don't really know how it's going to impact. And you think that it's going to be karma and it's all going to work out, but it didn't.
Mind you, these racers hadn't even seen season 32 yet.
No,
so, like, this is all naturally just playing out. So everyone seems to do pretty well with the bagpipes. They had the directions there to figure it out. Very different from Paraguay, where we didn't have directions. We had one example to replicate, and that was it. So it was kind of nice to have, like, as intricate as a bagpipe is, to have those directions. Akbar ends up passing Isaiah. Isaiah was the first to this roadblock, but Akbar passes Isaiah. Taylor and Isaiah are the last team to leave the roadblock. But then you have your detour. So this detour is kilt or rebuilt. This leg's detour was a choice between kilt or rebuilt, and kilt teams had to learn and perform the song Donald, Where's Your Trousers and Highland Dress to receive your next clue. In rebuilt, teams had to remove the top 2 metal hoops from 2 whiskey barrels, hammer in a new head into each barrel, and then replace the hoops to receive their next clue from the master hooper. Well, we've actually, since we just watched this is fresh on our mind, we didn't have a chance to discuss. What do you think we would have done? Do you think we would have done kilt or rebuilt?
So I personally think we would have done kilt. Mainly because thinking about us as humans, learning a song, if there's a dance involved, also they speak English there. I'm not going to learn in a different language. Feels right up our alley. I teach dance, so memorizing. I mean, in school, you learn the preamble, all these things that you need to memorize, poetry and whatever. Memorizing something doesn't feel hard. So that was, I think my brain immediately would have said, we're doing the kilt. Also, an outfit. I love an outfit change.
I think because, you are a dancer, I have a musical theater background. I think just an opportunity to, like, dress up and put on a show just totally seems very Will and James. So we would definitely have done that detour for sure. But Arun and Taj, so let's start with Rebuild. Rebuild has Ryan and Dusty, Anthony and Spencer, Sam and Connie, Raquel and Kayla, Ray and Caro, and we have Arun and Natalia. Arun and Natalia, I feel like fairly quickly are doing this and then decide this is not for us. So they end up switching the detour midway, which that, to me, before we even went on the race, like, that is a bigger rule to me than helping another team. Like, don't switch detours.
I mean, this speaks to the power of Hung and Chi and the amount of times that they switch detours and were never eliminated. That's insane. Switching a detour, I think you and I chose all the detours that fit us really well. So we it was worked out.
Right.
Switching after having done it for a while and seeing teams succeeding at it, but then knowing that, like, if I knew that Penn and Cam were doing the singing and I knew that they were the Christmas Jammies family, like, that's their challenge. Like, I would have known that I probably am going to put myself in the back of the pack by switching, especially when her dad is like, I don't think I can do it. So it felt like you're switching to an even harder task based on their individual skill sets. So it was a weird choice for me, just knowing what he was saying about it. But I mean, they did it, they switched.
Yeah, it was definitely a gamble. For Rebuild, it seemed pretty straightforward. There was one point, though, when Anthony's doing it and Spencer's not doing anything. And I feel like you looked at the TV and you're like, why aren't you doing anything?
He's talking to the camera, like, chilling, like, yeah, we're doing really good. And I'm like, if I don't have something in my hands and I'm not moving or doing something, then I'm like, I'm wrong.
Yeah. And I feel like the Rebuilt task, like, I think Kilt was like a detour that outshined these two choices. Like, Kilt was clearly like the more fun visual detour. As far as Rebuilt, yeah, the rebuilt detour didn't really do it for me. Will stepped away or got disconnected. So we'll talk about the kilt portion of this detour. You have Kim and Penn, who this is totally just made for them. Like this detour is so catered to their strengths. I am going to anticipate a Christmas Truesers parody this Christmas. You have what, 10, 11 months to put that together, but Christmas Truesers, I am looking forward to that. Totally in their element. We see Penn kind of have a moment with the judge about not learning it the way that the actual challenge was. And he even admitted that he had a little moment of being a diva, but I think that's natural. Like you're learning a song, you have a way to learn it, you have someone teaching you it, but when you get up there and it's not how you were taught, I can see why that frustration would have been there. But they seem to fix their mistake relatively quickly and bounce back from that. Will, I was just saying that
Oh, I heard you.
Penn had his little moment with the fact that it wasn't what he learned. But they bounced back pretty quickly and they knew exactly what they did wrong. And I really, again, looking forward to Christmas Choosers.
Yes, I had to go to the restroom. I apologize. I drank all my water. My comment is you're dealing with somebody when he doesn't get into it, but kind of like has a control moment. You're dealing with somebody who makes this type of parody videos wearing costumes and stuff for a living. And he doesn't have control over anything. So of course he's going to be a little diva because he's not producing his own show. You know what I mean?
No, I think it was a natural reaction.
Oh, totally. But again, that challenge was absolutely made for them. Even if it took them 2 or 3 tries, there was no question that they chose the right one, but also were going to succeed.
Just really quick, is there an echo? Because my headphones died, so I don't want there to be an echo.
You sound better, actually.
Oh my gosh, great. Hello. Lulu and Lala are actually performing really, really well this leg. They just didn't seem to bicker or argue, from the last leg. It didn't seem to carry over. So they did pretty well at this detour. Taylor and Isaiah, their wedding dance went viral. So it's no shock that they picked this detour. Akbar and Sheridan were so fun to watch during this detour. Sherry, her face when she was delivering this performance, that was a moment, and I just loved it. Sherry and Akbar were fun, and then Arun and Natalia were really, really struggling at this. And when they had their moment after the detour, I felt so bad. I was getting a little teary-eyed when Arun really just felt like he let down Natalia. And Natalia, just so sweet, trying everything she can to boost her father's spirits. You didn't let me down. I'm so lucky to have you for my dad. And that was just really heartbreaking to watch, especially because you know how much of a super fan these two are. They've been watching the race ever since Natalia was 8 years old. So yeah, I just felt that.
And he tried so hard. He tried so hard to do it and maybe got frustrated, but there's a comment that says, do you think his accent hurt him? I don't think that's the right question. I don't particularly know what his first language is, but I think going to assume that it's not English. But for somebody similar to us going to Germany, where German is not our first language, I think it's hard. It's hard to get phonetically how you're supposed to say different words in a sequence that's memorized. I think that's really challenging. But the fact that he tried so hard and honestly accomplished it and did pretty well. I mean, it took him a couple times, but he did it. And I think that is to be admired. And again, I don't think that he let Natalia down because he stepped up and he did a really great job.
So the way the placements shook out for this leg was Ryan and Dusty in first. Oh, sorry, not in first. Kim and Penn in first. They win a trip for two to Cape Cod. Then you have Ryan and Dusty in second, Anthony and Spencer, Connie and Sam, Caro and Ray, Raquel and Kayla, Lulu and Lala, Taylor and Isaiah, Akbar and Sherry, and unfortunately, Arun and Natalia checking in last, which meant that they were eliminated from the race. So bummed to see them go early. Again, this is not knowing how the next few episodes are going to, or the next episode's going to play out. I'm just happy that they had the experience and that they were able to fulfill this like lifelong dream of doing the Amazing Race together. But I was really sad to see them go. It was so soon and so heartbreaking. And, I know a lot of people online were like, well, you shouldn't have helped other teams. Like, if you really, come on, y'all, let's like actually critically think about the situation of the race for a minute. Like, yes, they helped Raquel, or Natalia helped Raquel and helped Sam at the roadblock. But even then, they struggled with the detour, and that to me is what tripped them up. It wasn't helping the other teams, it was tripping up at the detour, because they didn't help Taylor and Isaiah, they didn't help Akbar and Sherry, they didn't help Lulu and Lala, and all three of those teams passed them too. So I don't fault them and their elimination being because they helped other teams.
No, I don't think that's why they were eliminated either.
No, it wasn't why they were eliminated. So
at all. No. Like remotely a reason why. Because Raquel and Sam would have figured it out within the next like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It wasn't that the building the whatever it called bagpipe was not something that would have taken much longer. I think that just choosing to do the other detour was the reason. Not even that they couldn't do the singing as well as I think they probably wanted to. I think it was just choosing to change detours. And that's the gamble. That's the gamble you take. That's the risk that they took, not helping other teams.
Yeah, I think if you're going to switch detours, you just get up and get out. Like, it's like one of those things where you make the decision within a matter of seconds. You assess, you're like, this isn't for me, get out. Where if you try it out for a while and then ultimately make the decision, you still lose a lot of time. So
there's a comment that they cut out some like hitting the barrel and that thing pops out, which I thought was actually odd that they cut it because it's in the promo. Like, why was it cut out of the episode? Granted, it's fine. Like, it's not a big deal. They cut challenges all the time on the race. They even cut advantages that they've given on the race. For instance, in season 31, they cut an entire advantage that was in episode 1. So it's not uncommon that they cut things, but I thought it was odd that it was included in the promo and then not in the episode.
Well, for the way this episode ended, it shows February 26, 2020. And again, watching these first 3 episodes, knowing this was before the world shut down and seeing people hug and, give kiss on the cheek or interacting with locals so closely, like, it's so weird to think of like what life was before the coronavirus. So February 26th or 28th, right?
I think it was the 28th.
2020. Crazy. I feel like you and I were at the Food and Wine Festival at Disney.
Oh my God, that's luck.
Phil gives the announcement, gathers all the teams. You actually see the production, which I loved, this like behind the veil shot of like seeing production looking all scrambled. It was really well done. Phil gives this announcement that from day one, the production's number one priority is to make sure that all the racers are safe. And as a fellow racer, that is 100% true. Like, everywhere you go on The Amazing Race, production is so incredible, so attentive to our safety. So loved that Phil stressed that, because I think the viewers should know how amazing this production really is. He mentions right now the world is dealing with the coronavirus, so the best choice is to suspend the race. Will, if we had been standing there, what do you think you would have felt? Like, I know for me, I would have been a mess. Like, this has been a dream of mine. We had gone through so many casting months prior to even getting on the race. It just would have been like, I felt like it would have been cut short. And then I know he says suspend the race. So there's always that, what if we don't come back? What if they just don't pick up where they left off and they just do a complete recast? You know me, for months, it would have destroyed me. I would have a very hard time with this.
Oh God. It would have been rough. I think it would have forced us to like have some really hard conversations about how to move on, but also that lingering feeling of it potentially popping back up again would have been like a lot of forced anxiety. I think we would have, over those 19 months, would have been in really good shape, knowing how the two of us prepped for the race if we knew that we were potentially going to go back. Yeah, it would have been really hard, and I can't fathom that emotion. I can't fathom. And I think we had a lot of conversations, especially because our season aired after they had stopped filming. Like, I think you asked me in the cast assessment, like, would you have rather 2 years of waiting for your season to air, which is how long we waited for it to air? Would you rather filming, stopping for 2 years, and then refilming? And any day I would pick having it air 2 years later, because knowing the outcome, no matter what place you get, you already have a little sense of closure. And I think none of these teams got closure until 19 months later.
Yeah.
Can't fathom. But the fact that so many of them came back and were able to do it again, and that production was able to do it safely, like you were saying, is a true testament to how careful this production is about the safety of not only the crew, but also the contestants, and making sure that everything goes without a hitch, that everyone's safe. Disney, February 29th, the day after they shut down.
Oh my gosh. You found it that quickly? You know, I think I remember seeing that because we were following Reality Fan Forum, and I feel like just that kind of information, we were like, they shut down. Anyway, so in due time, 19 months later, we see at the end of this episode, the teams who decide to return gather at St. Gallen, Switzerland or whatever. It's Ryan and Dusty, Kim and Penn, Raquel and Kayla, Akbar and Sheridan, and Lulu and Lala. So 5 of the teams who remained came back, which means we're missing a few, like Ray and Caro, Connie and Sam, Taylor and Isaiah, as well as Anthony and Spencer. For those of you who don't keep up with sneak peeks, or those of you who don't follow promos for the next episodes and don't know this information, you might want to turn it off or mute, whatever you feel more comfortable with, because the 2 teams that do return to the race are actually Michael and Mo and Arun and Natalia. I'm really excited to see them come back. And I feel like it's kind of fair in some ways, right? Like, they got eliminated, but now that they have a chance to come back, they're going to learn from their mistakes. They know what it's like to be eliminated. They don't want that feeling again. So they're going to have that extra edge to like fight harder, maybe be a little bit more competitive, maybe have a little bit more of a hustle. Whereas the teams who were still in it that came back, they still had 19 months to prepare as well. So I feel like this is a completely new race, a complete reset and restart, which is why this is the prequel. This is now the actual amazing race that we're about to witness over the next couple of episodes.
Well, and it kind of, I don't know if it changes who I put in my top 3. Now seeing the teams race, I agree with you. I think this is perfect because it is a brand new race. The teams come back. The one thing that I think, and I don't know if they do this, but with the 2 teams that do come back after being eliminated, it would make sense for them to do a speed bump. And if they do, great. If they don't, it's fine. I get it. But after having seen the teams race for 3 episodes, I still think that my top 3 are, I don't remember who I said, but I think it was Kim and Penn, it was Raquel and Kayla, and I want to say I said Arun and Natalia. I think those 3 were the ones that I said, and I think you've seen this clear.
No, you said Akbar and Sheridan.
Oh, just because I like them.
You said Akbar and Sheridan, Arun and Natalia, and Raquel and Kayla.
Yeah, just because I thought that they were funny. I remember that. I would remove Akbar and Sheridan.
So you would change your order.
I would change now, knowing the real detail. And I would put Kim and Penn because I think their dynamic is way more beneficial long term in the race. I would keep Arun and Natalia because I think they'll learn now that they're back. And I also would keep Raquel and Kayla because they really didn't struggle. And also didn't need to not rely on the bonds that they had with other teams like Dusty and Ryan. Do I think Dusty and Ryan are still a strong team? Yes, but I think Raquel and Kayla have a little bit more agency to do well long term.
I agree. My final three, or my top three teams, knowing now that we're moving forward, top 7, like this is the race, my top 3 teams are going to change. Raquel and Kayla, to me, is my winner's pick. That's who I predict is going to win this season. I think just based on the edit, how well they're working together as a team, I would not be surprised if they were the winners. I also feel like we're due for an all-female team to win.
I think they're the female team that could do it.
Totally. I'm actually going to take out Arun and Natalia. I love them. I think that they're great super fans. And I know that they had a lot of months to prep and prepare. But I mean, like you saw how Arun struggled with the detour. There might be a challenge that comes again where he's going to struggle. And like, that's nothing against Arun. That's not something you can really prepare for. That's just maybe something might be a downfall. So I'm actually going to take Arun and Natalia out. I still think they're going to be a top tier team moving forward. But I'm going to say Kim and Penn are going to take that spot now. I said at one point during the race, Kim and Penn, or during this episode, I feel like Kim and Penn, the way they work well together kind of reminds me a lot of us. They communicate really well. They know how to support each other. She knows how to like support him with his hyper focus and his ADHD. And he's just really positive, like good support system for Kim, who like is very honest and open with her feelings. I think they're going to be a strong, formidable team, and they've performed really well. And ironically enough, they've gotten similar placements to us. They got 4th on the first leg like we did. They got 5th on the second. We got 6th, but 5th. And then 1st on the 3rd leg, which we got. So I like Kim and Penn in those comparisons. But I'm also going to keep Ryan and Dusty in the top. I think they know when to work with another team versus when to not. I think they're a strong team. Like they are making up for lost time. So they have a lot at stake and why they want to stay in the race together. So those are my 3 that I think are the most consistent as of now and have the most hustle. They're having fun. They're competitive. And I still think Kayla and Raquel are my winner pick.
The other team that I would say is obviously Dusty and Ryan. They're having a good time. They're not really struggling. They're very strong, and male teams traditionally do really well. I don't necessarily know if I would say that they're going to win, but I do think they are a high. I think they're going to do pretty well.
Callie says the 2 teams coming back part ways, kind of like the stowaway twist, which happened in the Amazing Race
Australia. Oh, God.
So true. Maybe a little bit different given the circumstances. But since we're, the chat's still talking about the 2 teams returning, y'all, I made a tweet.
Oh, my God.
That says, Amazing Race Phil, some familiar faces will be joining us. Surprise, y'all, we're back. And I put a picture of Will and I and Leo and Alana. And some people actually believed it. Like, so funny to me. But no, it's Arun and Natalia, Michael and Mo. So that wraps up the 3 episodes. I'm glad we were able to do all 3. Looking forward to this fresh restart. Will and I will have some exciting news this week as well about how we're going to be involved moving forward with the race. So that's that. That's our recap for the first 3 episodes. And we'll post when we're coming back for our episode 4 recap. And we're definitely going to have some special guests moving forward from our season, some former race alumni from other seasons. And who knows, maybe we'll get an eliminated team throughout the season as well to come share their experience with us.
Oh, definitely.
A lot of them are doing recaps, like Kim and Penn are doing recaps. Lulu and Lala are doing recaps. I know Caro's been doing recaps. So if you haven't checked out theirs, I know as a fan myself, I love hearing firsthand experience. I want to know behind the scenes. So make sure you check out all of their recaps as well to hear about what their real experiences were like during the Amazing Race. But Will, do you have any final thoughts or anything else to say?
No, I'm just excited for this new season to air. I think it's going to be great. I think fans need to know that it is going to look different. It's going to feel like the Amazing Race, but it's probably going to be a little different than I think what people are accustomed to in terms of structure and kind of how people maneuver around the world. But obviously take that and recognize that there's a global pandemic, and their first goal is to make everybody feel safe. So I'm just thrilled that we actually get to watch a new season of the race. It's been far too long. And I like all the 7 teams that are racing. Not that I disliked any of the 4 that aren't back, but I'm excited to see how things shift and maneuver in this new phase.
I agree. Real quick rapid fire question from Callie, who's been so wonderful at asking questions throughout our recap. Which episode was the best out of the 3? We don't need to give explanations. Which episode? 1, 2, or 3?
2.
2. I agree.
3 was, I don't know. It was good, but
3 was fun.
I thought 2 was better.
But if you all want to know, there are so many wonderful recaps out there. I know I mentioned the current race teams who are doing recaps, but if you go to RTV Warriors podcast, they have a blog. They actually list all of the different recap shows for this season on there. So make sure to go check them out. There's so many. I know that we mentioned Nerdtainment. You have Rob Has a Podcast. Just go check out the list, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of content to listen to. But other than that, I'll leave you with this. If you were thinking about doing the Amazing Race, now is the chance to apply. I feel like more than ever, just an opportunity to see the world after the past 2 years. So we would like to encourage you. Casting for the Amazing Race is now open, and they're looking for teams of 2 who want to race around the world. So if that's you and you've been waiting for the opportunity to apply, this is your sign to go do it. TheAmazingRaceCasting.com. And hopefully we'll see you on a future season of The Amazing Race.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching our recap, and we'll see you soon for episode 4. Bye, everyone.